Welcome to the Breakout Growth Podcast, where Sean Ellis and Ethan Garr interview leaders from the world's fastest growing companies to get to the heart of what's really driving their growth. And now, here are your hosts, Sean Ellis and Ethan Garr.
All right, in this week's episode of the Breakout Growth Podcast, Ethan Garr and I chat with Google's Gen AI product lead, Marily Nika. So AI, product leadership, and strategies for harnessing AI for maximum impact are some of the most exciting and fast-changing topics in growth. So it was awesome for us to have the opportunity to sit down with someone who hasn't just been talking about AI for a few months. She's actually been living it for almost a decade now. Yeah. So Ethan, I know we've had a lot of conversations about AI. With Justin Kistner, we talked about just practical prompting advice. With others, we talked about how to evolve in this landscape. This one feels different. So what stood out for you?
Yeah, this is awesome, Sean. What stood out for me most was Marily's take on AI as an enabler. She had this great line where she said, AI isn't the product. AI tools, AI models, AI agents, all these things we talk about, these are not the product. The experience is the product. You know, this is going to shift the way we think, and it's going to be huge for growth teams who are right now trying to rush in to integrate AI. But it can't just be about slapping AI onto your product. It's got to be about how AI enhances the customer experience and delivers real value. You know, the foundation hasn't changed. Foundation of growth is still about value creation and experience. AI is a new tool that we can use. It's like a new weapon we can go to war with. It's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of my favorite parts of the conversation was when we dug into how AI can be a massive accelerator for early stage startups. So yeah, Marily made a great point. She's like, startups can move faster with AI because they have less to lose and more to gain. They're not bogged down by bureaucracy. They can just experiment and go. And we talked about other things like the North Star metric, the role of experimentation, and how AI can really be applied without falling into that kind of shiny object trap. There's obviously a lot of hype around AI, but this is really about building on the solid foundation.
Yeah, I think whether you're a founder or a growth leader or a product manager, this episode's you're going to find something in this one that's really valuable for you. It's all about real actionable insights, really authentic stuff that you can dive into with AI, stuff that's really going to drive business impact. And I think it's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. AI is transforming the way we build and grow products, and Marily has dug, or just has this like deep practical understanding of what works and what doesn't. So it's going to be super valuable for the audience, and it builds on a Substack post that I put out last night that's kind of blowing up right now, and it just my take on why AI is changing everything in startups. It started with a Lenny's podcast that I listened to earlier this week that just got my mind spinning. Where we talked to the founder CEO of Lovable, and just the insights from that just got me super excited about where things are heading, particularly for early stage, kind of go to market stage startups. So you can check out that post at seanellis.substack.com.
Yeah. So should we dive in with Marily?
Yeah, let's do it. Hi, Marily. Welcome to the Breakout Growth Podcast.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you on. I'm also joined by my co-host Ethan Garr. I know Ethan, you're equally excited to have Marily on.
Yeah, absolutely. Greetings from sunny Florida today. But yeah, I've been looking forward to this one with you, Marily. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, so Ethan and I actually just before this call, we were both reflecting on it's crazy that you've had AI titles for more than 10 years now. I think most people had no idea even what AI was until the last couple of years. So I would love if you could maybe give us a quick overview of your journey of how you got into AI and just any of those highlights on where you are with your career.
Yeah, sounds good. I like to say that I was doing it before it was cool and suddenly blew up, and I guess I'm at the right place at the right time. So I grew up in Greece, and I always loved computer games, and from classic puzzle games to chess to anything you can imagine on video games. And that's where I saw AI for the first time, where I would play a game and there was like a computer opponent that would learn from the way I behave, and then the biggest challenge would be for me to be able to be the component that knows me. So that's how I experienced AI the very first time. And
Wow.
for many years, it was tied to that. AI to me was video games, period. I would never
Interesting.
imagine it anywhere else. So, and then I grew up and I wanted to work in computer games, and I did a master's and a PhD in computer games, in computing science, and I added the machine learning element there just because I knew that would lead me to computer games. That's why, and it's a very unconventional path, I guess, to product management and
Right.
AI. But yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, I remember like in the past, people used to talk a lot more about machine learning. Now they talk a lot more about AI. Is there really like much of a difference, or what is the difference if there is?
Yeah, AI is the overall umbrella, and there's, so many advancements that have taken place over the years. In the beginning, it was literally, simple rules. The computer would learn basic things like, oh, Mary does this and this. So she did it 5 times, then I understand that she's likely to do it again, heavy on probabilities and all these things. Eventually we had new techniques like deep learning and of course now with generative AI. But in the beginning it was very, very simple. Like we see a lot of instances of the same thing occurring, so we can predict what's going to happen kind of in the future. So, but even that was machine learning to some capacity, right? But yeah, no one kind of expected the explosion of what we're all experiencing with these generative AI tools now. And a lot of people don't know how to approach them, and they don't understand this kind of fast-paced environment. And so it helps to have kind of the background of understanding AI, as it used to be, especially now that I'm building AI products, and I'm not afraid of it. I'm not overwhelmed of it. So it's it's been a great journey.
So especially like, as you said, the last couple of years, we've had this sort of Gen AI explosion. And I think we see it all the time, like this sort of shiny object trap where, it's like, we have to be an AI company. So people are just like throwing AI into everything. And I'm not sure it's sort of like put the solution in front of the problem or sometimes. So I guess a good starting point for is how can growth teams ensure they're applying AI in a way that actually improves measurable growth?
Yeah, very, very good question. Well, let's see. Let's take a step back because growth, I think, is just one part of the spectrum, right? With AI, and when I'm building, I work for Google right now, and I build AI products. And often people come to me and they say, "Well, what does success mean? How do you even measure success in AI products, right?" And I like to say, well, there are different buckets of metrics that you need to leverage. Number one, you have your AI proxy metrics, like how accurate is that model? And you measure that with, accuracy with false accepts, false rejects, this sort of thing. And then you have the classic product metrics, one of them being growth, but more things like retention. Are people coming back to use this again? Or how much are people engaging with this? And then there's one more bucket, which is kind of the system health metrics, because with AI, we don't really know how the system is going to behave if you get like millions of people in there trying to use, it requires immense computational power to be able to provide an experience that's AI enabled. So first of all, I think everyone needs to understand kind of this spectrum, that with AI, you have that extra consideration, which is the system and which is the accuracy of the model. Sometimes you may have this amazing product that if you change slightly the model, everything will crash. So it's important for everyone to have AI awareness. That's what I like saying. And I actually founded an AI product academy where I teach that stuff just because people need to understand AI, period. Now, specifically for measurable growth, so we have a product, we set our goals and our OKRs, and then the most important thing is to set our North Star metric, right? So what's the single metric that best represents the value we are going to deliver, whether this is revenue per user or what's the user base looking like? Are we getting more people on, etc.? So, and we want to make sure that ties back to the mission of the company or startup or whatever it is. Number two, we need to use data analytics tools, and there's amazing tools out there. There is Amplitude, there is Mixpanel, Google Analytics, of course. And we can see where people are dropping off, right? And we can understand, okay, what are they engaging with the most? And then we figure out, what's worth solving. Sometimes problems that I've seen can be literally people don't understand how to engage with an AI tool, and you just need to train them or add more awareness or make things less scary and overwhelming. Sometimes people are like, I don't know if I want to do this. And then the other thing is people need to have this experimental culture in their companies where you hypothesize a lot and validate. So if you say something like, look, we are going to use AI to personalize onboarding for growth, you need to say, we expect a 10% increase in day 7 retention or something like this. But then you need to validate that hypothesis with some small pilot or like A/B test. And again, there are platforms you can use like Optimizely. I think is one that's good. But yeah, I'm going overboard.
It almost sounds like that what you're saying is the foundations of good growth and product leadership haven't changed. AI augments those, right? Like, because those are like what you've described. Those are like the principles that Sean and I we really believe in. So it sounds like AI is a new tool to enhance that and augment that.
Yeah, you enhance and you augment the process, but you always need to have this experimental approach to it because AI has a probabilistic nature to it, and no one can predict outcomes or anything like this. So that's very important.
So one of the things that it's kind of fun. I was re-listening to. I listened to it a long time ago when you were on Lenny's podcast, and was re-listening to it just this morning to kind of refresh some of the parts of that conversation. And I don't know if you've gone back and listened to it, but obviously things evolve so quickly. Someone was asking me recently, "Hey, are you going to write a book about growth in AI?" And I basically said, it would be outdated so quickly because things that I think are really cool today in another year are going to look like, kindergarten stuff, silly. And so I'm just curious if you've gone back and looked at it and you have opinions on some of the things you talked about then.
Yes, and we actually exchanged a couple of emails because I said, hey, there's a lot that's outdated. We probably need to do another one soon. Yeah, but I don't feel it's bad to write a book or talk about these things because you set the foundations for what's to come next. And the other thing is people don't learn in the same way because we assume that everyone is here in kind of this progress of how quickly AI moves, but some people are just getting started. So I don't think it's a bad thing for artifacts, let's say, to exist here and there. But yeah, a lot of it. And I just finished a book that I just published. And
cool.
The second I submit the book, the next day, DeepSeek comes out. And then the day after, OpenAI Operator comes out. And it's like, oh my God, there's so much. But you gotta say, I'm drawing the line here.
Yeah.
This adds value, and then I need to, if anything, add more material eventually. So,
right. Yeah. So one of the things, kind of like going through the fundamentals of AI, and I know a lot of that conversation was around AI in product management, and I know that's the course that you teach as well. Obviously, a big part of this podcast is focused on how can we help founders actually drive growth, and you touched on some of these things that there's just fundamental pieces without retention there is no growth, without value there is no retention, and so I'm curious if you feel like AI can be applied in ways like so value is important, but making that value accessible and quickly accessible. So speed to value is one of the areas that I tend to focus on the most when I first start with a company because there's so much growth that can be unlocked with that. Do you see a role for AI in being able to help with speed to value?
Yes, very good question. I posted on LinkedIn the other day and I say, hey everyone, AI is not the product. AI tools, AI models, AI agents, these are not the product. The product is the experience. So with AI, you can provide a personalized onboarding experience. You can provide personalized targeting. You can predict things better. You can suggest things. You can be there at the right place at the right time for the right person. You can have better customer support that's automated. You can have personalized experimentation. So I think that angle, when you have something AI powered and things become highly personalized, the experience is becoming excellent. And I think experience is underrated with everything, and especially growth, right? I don't know. I see attempts for growth on tools every single day, whether it's like a notification saying, hey, want to try this out, or a recommendation. When it's like, hey, Marily, we think you would like this, it's by far uncomparable to any other strategy, I would say. So,
especially if it even highlights why you would like it based on some information it has about you, it just starts to, it's much more likely to hit the mark than just sort of the generic messaging that we've all been used to.
And not just that, like Spotify, for example, says, hey, people that listen to the songs you like are adding these 2 new songs to their playlist. And that's so much value, because it takes away from me. It improves convenience. It reduces the amount of time of me spending to discover something new. So that also, the adjacent people and demographic angle that it can add, I think is phenomenal.
And just helping to unlock new value within the product that you might not have found on your own.
Correct.
Yeah, I wish just before this, before we jumped on, I saw on LinkedIn one of our former guests, Charlie Cole, had posted. He's in the e-commerce space, and he was talking about dual something with AI, and he was really talking about how AI really has this amazing power to drive unique experiences, really those authentic, deep experiences. But you're right, it starts with not thinking of AI as the experience, but rather as the product as the experience. Like, how do I get this person from point A to point B in a way that makes sense to them? And I think that's where we're starting to see really fine-grained approaches to using AI to really speak to people on a deep level. So going back, you had mentioned North Star metric before, and it's something that Sean really has brought to life for a lot of companies, and something I really believe is super important. Do you feel like AI changes what we can do to get users closer to that North Star metric and the North Star experience?
Very good question. I think that we in a company internally would have more clarity as to what's happening in our product, and we'd be able to get better alignment as to strategies we need to execute in order to reach that North Star and get closer to it, if that makes sense. So I think there's something to that. It may be indirect, but clarity, I think, is so important in understanding the users better and predicting that, hey, people may be starting to get bored, or growth may start to hold down the line unless we align and implement kind of different strategies or something like that. There's also, I was reading something about AI, how it can help us get more consistent, and it can optimize for micrometrics like clicks or immediate conversions. And then if these don't demonstrate that we're headed towards the North Star, maybe we may have short-term lifts that don't necessarily translate to longer-term growth. So I think that clarity is a very important piece, not being discussed very, very much.
So do you sometimes worry though that AI is very good at sort of the short term, but the long term, keeping the long term in focus is not what it's best at? I guess a good example might be if you use AI in your experimentation process around maybe around payments and initial payments and how it affects users versus revenue. Really, AI is great for that, but what does it do to churn 6, 9, 12 months down the road? That's harder to predict. Do you worry about that at all?
The thing is, if you wouldn't worry about this, then AI would take over our jobs, right? So that's why AI is a tool, and you can get inspiration from it and get the help, but it will never replace us and our experience and what we've seen in other companies and what we hear. So I don't worry, because I know how to judge where AI begins and where it ends. Whereas if you see people that are like, oh, this is it, this is going to solve all my problems, then you know that there's a problem there fundamentally.
But it can process a lot more data probably more efficiently than we can, and so even in that case, like what is the long-term effects of a test, for example? It feels like if you know the right way to ask the questions, that AI can be really helpful with that.
Yes, for sure. It all goes back to experimentation. And I made a post on LinkedIn saying 2025 is going to be the year of experimentation and just trying things out. And I was training this company the other day, and they had like millions of data that was just not in order. It was a mess. And they said, how can they use AI to make sense of it? They loaded it up, and then AI organized it, getting insights, created graphs and charts, and it was great. But they just didn't know how to engage with it. They didn't know what to do with it, and it became this scary, weird thing they didn't want.
Maybe information overload a bit.
Yeah, so you kind of need to have the appetite, if you will, to be a bit more open to changing the ways a company on a company level works. And that's not comfortable for all domains, right? Especially if you're not in tech. So it's
yeah. So I mean, I think data ends up being a pretty important question here, because a lot of people that are listening today might be pretty early stage startups, and obviously with things like personalization, you're going to need a lot of data to be able to do that. But is AI useful when you don't have a lot of data? Are there still some things you can do to benefit from it?
Yeah, good question. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? So there are pre-trained models and APIs that people can use, like GPT-4 or Hugging Face Hub for more text-based things. And then you can literally fine-tune on a smaller data set, or you can even find models to use out of the box. I think a great example is Google AutoML. You just go there, there's pre-trained models you can start with. And that's the thing, when you're starting, it's not about having the data to create something. It's more like, what is your hypothesis? What do you think this can do for you? And is it worth investing in it? So that's the first question you need to answer versus, how am I going to find data? There was a startup that came to me and said, we're building an experience for people that go on vacation, and we generate like the agenda for where they're going based on if they're a family or a couple or whatever, but we don't have data. And I said, you don't need data. You have to validate whether this is something that's going to add value. Just hard code the data. Synthesize the data, or use pre-trained models. If something, find something else. So yeah, synthesizing data is another interesting thing you can do. And there's an amazing tool called Snorkel AI. They do programmatic data labeling, or synthesis AI for synthetic data. And you can just bootstrap model training, even with limited data. So my advice to people is, look, start with a very narrow use case. Start with a very narrow hypothesis. Solve this tiny problem that's critical, like improving sign-up conversion or whatever, and then see if this is for you, and then the rest will come. And then the last thing I'm going to say, there's so much data out there that people don't know about. There's a search engine called Google Data Search. They have data that people can get. There are agencies that collect data for you for very cheap. There are workarounds, so don't get worried or lost. Just have the hypothesis and work on that.
And then I also think, just on this topic, that obviously a lot of early stage companies, it's not so much about like personalizing experiences as it is about figuring out, have we created any value at all, and who are the customers who need that value. So I do feel like a lot of that speed to learning, whether it's using AI to help with ideation and prioritizing tests and modeling things out, that speed to learning is really important for a company that might not have a lot of data, and AI can still be probably pretty helpful in those situations.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I see a trend nowadays in startups. Like, I see the technical co-founder and the CEO that's going to talk to VCs and do all these things. And after they raise some funding, they realize, oh, wait, we need to invest in the product now. And, how do you bridge that tech, the AI tech the CTO has with the experience? And that's when they want to hire their first PM and they were on everything you're talking about right now. But yeah, it's interesting how AI changes fundamentally what we've known for organizations and startups, and every stage of kind of the life cycle of the company, let's say.
I'm curious, you mentioned the course that you teach, and it sounds like it's AI for PMs. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that kind of ties into this?
Yeah, sounds good. So it's AI product management, and it's tailored for product leaders or people that want to get into product. And it essentially walks people through the superpowers, as I like to call them, of AI, and how you can leverage them to add them into an experience. For example, as I said, like recommendations and suggestions and distilling content, generating content, multimodality, and all these things. People just don't know how to work with the scientist counterpart or the engineering counterpart to integrate this magic, as I like to call it, into an experience. So it takes people throughout the AI product development lifecycle and walks them through how to think strategically about what to do with AI and avoid that shiny object trap you were talking about. But I genuinely think that all product managers will be AI product managers in the future, so we just can't avoid it. Like we've got to do it, and learn.
So it's really interesting. I definitely want to dig back into AI. All product managers will be AI product managers in the future. That's an interesting statement. But you mentioned something. So I think as a product guy, a product manager, one of the key things that was important for my career was learning how to communicate with engineers. And it sounds like what you're saying is with AI, there's new and important ways to do that. How it's fun, when everything with AI is, now you can speak in plain English, right? You can code in plain English. Can you tell us a little bit about the nuance there about we can you can prompt in plain English, but what is a little bit about what the PM relationship with engineering, what is the language barrier there and how do we overcome it?
Well, you have this whole new user persona, as I like to call it. You have the engineer that you've had forever, right? But you also have now the research scientists. And they are the ones that take the data and write the code, create the actual model that learns and create the algorithm. And working with these folks requires a whole different skill set. So essentially, it's kind of this trio of the PM, the engineer, and the research scientist in order to put an experience together. And the engineer is integrating everything in one piece, but the scientist is the one that's creating the magic. And let me give you an example. Research scientists care about research and advancing and moving forward and improving metrics and all these things, and they like publishing research and conferences. The PM wants to launch the experience and move fast, right? So there is this kind of dance I've seen where the scientist is like, well, the quality is not good enough. I need it to be perfect before we launch. Whereas the PM is like, look, you're still adding value if you unlock this potential for people, even if it's not perfect. So there's this kind of, I think what it comes down to is that the AI PM deals with trade-offs all day long and kind of balances the trade-offs between all these different stakeholders and decides, where do we begin, where do we end, when do we launch? And there's so much like privacy considerations and impact and effort from scientists, engineers, cost. There's no day that's boring. Let me start this.
It cracks me up because when Sean and I first started working together at Upro.com, we had a data analyst on our team, and it was sort of the same challenge. Well, the data's not perfect. I can't help you, but we need to move fast. So I don't want to say how long ago it was, but it was a long time ago, and it seems like things have not changed that much, Sean.
Yeah, it was definitely frustrating back then, and we need to make this massive investment to be able to have the data to do anything. I want to take it in a slightly different direction. I personally, I've seen a major shift in just my day-to-day workflow where generative AI assists me with everything now. And I don't care what it is. My first instinct is how can I use generative AI to help me with this? I'm curious what you're seeing out there, or where you see things going. If it's over time, are people going to benefit going to continue to sort of push the envelope on Gemini and ChatGPT in terms of how to get to ask the right questions with the right prompts to get the things they want. And I've been hearing that AI is being added to more and more products that we use every day. For example, say Amplitude or something like that, or A/B testing platforms. Do you see which one do you see like longer term starting to impact growth more? These kind of specialized tools that are powered by AI, or more general platforms that you kind of just get creative about how do you leverage those to do what you're trying to do?
I think you're talking about agentic AI now, because when you say specialized tools, I hear, agents versus the generic platform. So I think a good example is, you have the standard UI where you can write your prompt in plain English, like you say for Google Gemini or ChatGPT, but you can also create a custom GPT that is specific and targeted for specific things. So I personally believe that in the future, it's going to be more about experiences powered by these models. And agentic AI is where it's at. So you are going to have, I don't know, like an agentic dashboard that's going to be able to proactively come to you and say, hey, that thing you cared about, come here, look at my data, look what I have based on the goals you set. So especially if you have like repeatable problems like churn prediction or personalized recommendations or anything like that, I think, that specialized aspect of agents can bring is going to be very important. Yeah. Like if you go to search now, right? If you search something on Google, it's going to add a little AI generated summary at the top.
Yeah.
So we'll see Gen AI sprinkled into everything we do. So I don't know if we're going to keep going back to the, these main interfaces we're used to.
Mm-hmm. And one of the areas that I'm thinking in particularly about is, so I teach a course called Go Practice, where a big part of the course, big part of the feedback that we get is people learning how to ask the right questions and run queries with Amplitude. So we built it on top of Amplitude data, and and it's like easier than SQL to be able to use something like Amplitude, but a natural language query is even easier than either of those, and it feels like we're going in a direction where Amplitude will eventually be much more just natural language queries. And so that's kind of more the angle that I don't know, is that agentic if you're just a natural language query, or is it more agentic when you're saying continue to monitor this and let me know if there's any problems?
I see some of these tools now that do have the interface you're talking about, saying, hey, write your prompt and I'll create a better prompt for you before we create the model. So I think that's a form of agentic in a way, because it's there to help you. A good example is there's this amazing underrated tool not a lot of people are using. It's called Zapier. And on Zapier, you can create zaps. And these zaps are essentially kind of workflows that are automated. And as part of that, you can say, hey, every day I want you to go on Claude and ask this question. And based on the answer you get, you can create a LinkedIn post, for example, like that, and it happens automatically. But I see they recently added on top a little interface, and they say, hey, write here in simple words what you want to do, and then we will recraft what you're asking for in step by step so that you know how to. So there's kind of this intermediary thing. But I think we're going to get someone to improve our queries before it disappears completely. So we'll just use 2 words, and then it's going to know who we are, and it's going to create the query for us.
It's kind of a gradual progression toward it'll read your mind and let you know exactly what you need.
We're far from that, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't quite mean that, but yeah. Go ahead, Ethan.
So I think this is kind of related to that, but like AI-powered chatbots, voice assistants, they're getting so much more advanced, and they're also getting so much more commonplace. Do you see them really becoming essential growth levers in the future?
I do, because there's so much we can understand from who the person is as the machine interacts with that person, that we'll end up understanding more about the user, so that again, it goes back to that personalization. We'll be able to personalize the best experiences and get the right people to the right places. So I think AI is just capturing more about who we are, like the the quantifiable skills and non-quantifiable qualities, I guess we have, and it can kind of have. Let me give you an example. Let's say you, and that doesn't exist, by the way, and I wish it existed. Let's say you speak to some device like your phone, and from the tone of your voice, it could understand what mood I'm on. Like, I'd love to have a little system that can say, "Hey, I think you're not very. Are you a bit sad today? Let me just play some upbeat music from your playlist that you would like." So it's this type of thing that you could do. You could derive to personalize experiences a bit more. But yeah, in terms of growth, I'm sure there are kind of similar use cases. But yeah, there's more we can capture, and we can personalize things in a better way.
Yeah, so another this related to some of the questions I've asked before, but one of the arguments that I spent a lot of time working with pretty early stage startups, and one of the arguments that I make to them is like they actually can probably benefit from AI, or at least generative AI in the short term, better than larger companies, because there's a lot of like fear. Like somebody was telling me the other day that even like they got in trouble for using Grammarly because like, oh, is there some proprietary information that's going in there? Where startups can kind of, they got a little less to lose. They can move faster, maybe take some risks. And then they also are really starved on resources. And so in a startup, if you can figure out how to get the multiplier of being way more productive, that a team of 3 or 4 people can act like a team of 10 or 20 people by really leveraging some of these tools. So I'm curious. Yeah, obviously my view on what's happening is kind of flawed by what I see day to day. So I'm curious if you agree that sort of startups have more advantage in the short term, and do you see that changing over time, where because of the big data sets of bigger companies that maybe they'll get more advantage in the longer term?
For sure, I see it a lot. Like, they optimize kind of for short-term gains, if you will, and we see a lot of these companies just strategizing for that and say, hey, I'm going to build this so that I can get acquired by a bigger company, so that they can have this ready. But I also see companies not understanding it and getting, background and exiting. I think there was this wonderful startup called Humane, and they actually had built that AI clip. You would put it here, and it would project on your hand. So there was no screen, and it would speak back to you. And it was this wonderful, like, I bought it. It was fantastic. But I think it was a startup building for long term, whereas they didn't realize that, to get into the hardware space and build for long term is just, you have to be very strategic about it. But I will say I'm starting to see a trend in bigger companies to mitigate for that, exactly what you're talking about, which is they create labs departments, and the labs departments kind of don't have the same scrutiny when it comes to privacy and legal, and they still have the benefits of having money and talent and data. So and I love exploring these kind of labs. Like, if you go on Facebook Reality Labs and Google Labs, I think this is the coolest kind of part of a company to be at right now because of these reasons.
And then they can kind of push some of that learning across the organization in a way that's maybe safe within those constraints, but they can first push the envelope with less constraints.
Exactly, and you do little pilots, and then you eventually can graduate the feature to the bigger company. So yeah, there's I don't know if you saw Notebook LM. It was this incredible tool, right? So you uploaded. It was an agent, right? An agent to be your research.
Another one that I heard about on Lenny's podcast.
And essentially it generates a podcast of people talking about it for you. Like, it was wild. So that was a Google Labs product, and again, if a big tech company tried to produce this, it would require so much. But if it's labs, I think things can move faster. But I love this kind of 0 to 1 innovation so much.
Yeah.
But so these labs, do you know are they typically set up as independent entities, so they're sort of totally protected, or the larger organization is totally protected?
I don't think they're separate entities. And what I love telling people is, because I do private trainings as well for companies, and a more traditional company came to me and said, "Oh, it'd be great if we had the time to work on cool stuff like that." And I say, well, that's an excellent opportunity for you. You can literally put a one-sheeter together and pitch labs for your company. And all it means is it's going to be 3, 4 people forming labs, and you test things out. You have kind of clearance to move fast and try things. And you just bypass a lot of the more procedural things. But it's not a separate entity. I wouldn't think so.
Gotcha.
Do you think, I remember like when mobile was first coming on, that a lot of companies benefited from it by being like mobile first, and they sort of displaced some of the companies that grew up on desktop. Do you think we'll see a similar, or are we already seeing a similar thing where if it's like an AI first company versus a company that's layering AI into existing products?
That is a very good question. And now that you say it, I see myself wanting to spend more time on my desktop because, I ask questions and I generate all this content in these tools, and I want to better be able to process it and read it. So that's a very interesting thing. I also see a trend in phones to now have bigger screens. So I don't know if that means we're all gonna go into tablets again or not. But I can see new form factors for sure, and it's exciting to see.
I think part of the angle of that question though is more like, is it better to build kind of with the blank slate new AI applications, or do you think the advantage is to companies that have big user bases on existing applications that make them better with AI?
Oh, I see. So question is 0 to 1 or like enhancing a 1-to-1 product.
Yeah.
I guess it goes back to strategy and how much risk you want to take as a company. Are you kind of the company that, wants to just keep going, or are you the company that wants to be the leader? And that's a big, big question. I see companies that do have the luxury to fail, kind of going bold and trying all these things just to see what sticks.
Yeah.
But also I see companies that couldn't afford failing, kind of, enhancing things. I had created a little custom GPT that creates a PRD, a product requirements doc for AI features. And the first question it asks is, do you want a 0-to-1 product or do you want a 1-to-1 product? And 1-to-1 would be something like, you work for Netflix and you want to create a better recommendation algorithm, let's say, for binge watchers specifically. It's a matter of a bet. Like, do you want to make a big bet or do you want to go safe? And it goes back to mission and strategy.
I'm sure it's a fascinating discussion. I'm sure we could actually spend a lot of time on it. But I sort of to your initial question, Sean, actually I've already seen. I'm advising a small startup, and it started as a desktop, sort of a desktop MVP, and like with the goal of building a mobile app. And there was this conversation where the AI component that we dreamed up after, it was like, wait a second, is this even a mobile app? Is the AI thing the thing? So those conversations I think are already starting to happen. But I think the jury's still out. But I agree like that. That I think what will happen is like things like form factors and phones and stuff like that will evolve because of how AI is changing, whether it's an app or whether you're doing something on the desktop. But
I have my Aura ring here as you're talking about it, which is, I wouldn't I wear a ring, but because of the AI, it's amazing. It can tell me so many things about my health, and it captures all this data, and it's just super, super good.
Yeah. So a completely different form.
Yeah, but still, right? This is a different form factor for AI, and it still, adds value.
Yeah. And I even think like voice becomes a different form as well. Like I've done some like deep thought exercises where I'm not looking at a computer or a phone. I'm just got my headphones in, and I'm going through an exploration process on a topic to get to know myself better, or get to plan something out, and get just researching an industry to just feel like I want to get more knowledge. So like instead of just podcasts where you're listening, I have ADD, so I have about 2 minutes of listening before my mind starts to wander, but with a question and answer, quick, like, okay, I got it. I want to ask this. I want to ask it. Like it's much more tuned to the way I like to learn.
He's actually just talking to me, but he thinks he's talking to AI. It gets old.
Voice, I think, is where it's at, and
so like another question that I know is one that comes up a lot with AI. Obviously, everyone's kind of worried about, is it going to take my job away? Is it not going to take my job away? There's big expectations about kind of massive kind of shifts in the workforce because of AI. I think in growth specifically, do you see any types of roles that will probably be more replaced, like maybe an analyst role, or is it something that really everything just gets better with AI and it just kind of augments the people?
Well, very, very good question. What I see, like a trend I see, and by the way, if you ask me this question, the answer is always AI is not going to replace the role, but people that leverage AI will replace those that don't in that role.
Right.
Like that's the fundamental.
Yeah.
But what I see is kind of the different roles you have throughout, the journey of growth, kind of getting merged onto one that kind of encapsulates more things. And I just see more traditional roles just taking more from the adjacent roles and becoming this kind of more holistic thing just because of AI. So you become more of an orchestrator, let's say, and it's great. It pushes people to outside of their comfort zone to learn more things, maybe some unconventional ways that to see and work. But yeah, I can see roles getting absorbed onto different roles, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Without wanting to be scary or anything, and it's totally fun. I think it's
Yeah.
great. We don't do tedious stuff anymore. We're more strategic, and we spend less time writing the same query over and over again. But yeah, that's what I envision.
So if you're in growth, or if you're in growth and let's say you have 1 hour a week, that like what's the one recommendation you would have to focus that hour on, so that you can level up your skills and stay relevant and become more effective in your job?
Very good question. Identify a real problem in your funnel or your problem, okay, or your product, sorry. And then spend the first 30 minutes experimenting with a no-code AI tool or a generative AI tool to just see if you can come up with potential solutions to that, okay? And then spend the rest 30 minutes reading a case study of a competitor or a similar business that solved that with AI. That will give you an understanding of truly knowing, okay, what's on your hands and what tools are out there that can help me tackle it. Okay, now that I understand this, what are people doing? Like, go out, get to conferences, like talk to people. But that case study of a competitor is a very interesting thing because you don't need to solve the wheel, reinvent the wheel. You can see how other people do it, but first own the problem and understand it.
Yeah, I love that.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
I love that because if you go straight to how someone else did it, then you're still like a spectator on how it all works. Where if you first try to do it yourself and then you see maybe you come up with something that's even more creative than what they did, or maybe you're like, oh gosh, I should have thought of that. But either way, you're probably evolving your skill set faster by first trying to solve your problem with AI before you look at how someone else has done it.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, it's sort of like one of the underlying sort of great things about prompting is like if there's a prompt that's helping someone get an answer, if you see that prompt, almost just naturally you'll take that prompt and you'll adapt it for yourself. I mean, Sean and I will do that where we send prompts to each other and like that we've used, and it's like I never just take what Sean sent me as is, because I'm like, oh, I wonder what would happen if I did this too, right? So I think it goes back to that, like trying to look at really understand the problem yourself and taking that time to kind of dive in, see what your hypothesis is and what you see, and then go to the second level.
Yep.
That's a really, I love that approach.
It'll give you confidence as well in the space, and you'll say, okay, that's what I want to do. Like that specific combination of what you saw there, what you tried before, and you have a holistic opinion.
Yeah, it feels like that's really kind of the only way to really effectively learn this stuff is to roll up your sleeves and just start trying stuff. And sometimes you'll be like, oh, that added no value, but every time you come across something that adds value, then you start to have a tool for the future when you come up against that problem.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that's a good area to sort of as we get close to the end here is like what maybe along the same lines as what you just shared, but what are some really like creative, whether it's in growth or anywhere else, just some really creative or maybe the most creative that you've recently seen of how someone's using AI to achieve a goal?
I am fascinated by the real-time element. So I'm fascinated by real-time personalization that adapts an experience instantly based on who is there. An example is there was some startup using LLMs to rewrite in-app copy on the fly to match someone's interests or like skill level or anything like that. It's, every user journey being dynamically tailored to maximize engagement. So that live real-time personalization is just phenomenal. And there was this app I was using. It was for generating images that it had toggles, and I would switch how creative I wanted to be or how fantastical and mythical, and it would change in real time. So that, I think, to me is the element, the real-time personalization for each user.
So cool. So, Sean, anything else before I ask the final question?
Ask our famous final question that we always like to end with.
Yeah, I don't mean this because I was looking because I wanted this conversation to end, but I don't know, for some reason I thought I can't wait to hear your answer on this, Marily. What's one thing you feel like you understand about growth today that maybe you didn't understand as well a few years ago?
It's very cheesy, but if you build it, people will come. And I think when I first created my bootcamp, it was kind of this thing. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to create this curriculum and, just see what happens. But the reality is you build something and people will come. And not only they'll come, and then they'll want more. And, you need to just keep thinking ahead. So that's the thing. You create something and then people will adopt it. So we should assume that things will grow, and we want to make sure we're ready for it. So I had built a startup ages ago, and there was this VC telling me, well, are you a marketplace or are you a platform? And I said, what do you mean? Well, if you were to sell this to someone, are you going to sell the technology of that marketplace you have and they can kind of take it and grow it or whatever? Or are you someone that's going to say, I am going to bring the people in this, and I'm going to sell the people and this? And that was a very interesting point, because it was like, oh, wait, you can build something and people will come to use it. You don't need to, build this amazing thing. Like, it's, people want to try things out, and people love demos, and people love being beta testers. So I think that's a very me thing. I would tell my younger self.
Yeah, but I also think with that once they try it, now you have some really valuable information. They're not all going to love it, but some will, and that starts to create that improvement loop where now you can understand why, but until you put it out there, everything's just kind of more theory.
Yeah.
So, Sean, just before you wrap up, I just wanted to ask Marily, you've described some of the things you do, like boot camps and it sounds like one-on-one engagements with companies. If people want to learn more about you or engage you or talk to you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn and I create content, and it's Marily Nika on LinkedIn. I'm about to reach 100,000 folks, which kind of ties back to what I said. Awesome. And it's just phenomenal to see how many people are interested in this domain. So
awesome. And your course is on Maven, is that right?
My course is on Maven, yeah.
Cool.
And people can find my newsletter as well, marily.substack.com. And yeah, I write a lot about my thoughts and opinions. So if you're interested, join me.
Awesome. Well, I just want to share a couple of my big takeaways here. So when coming into the conversation, so much of my own personal use with AI has been more around just pushing the envelope on learning. So whether it's I love to upload like a CSV of surveys and be able to really like parse the data and more deeply understand it, or if it's accelerating the test learn process. But through this conversation, I I am more and more, and a lot of people have been talking about for a long time, but I think you really set the light bulb for me about just how important personalization is, and how AI is going to power personalization on a level that we've never been able to do up to this point, and that personalization is going to be a super powerful growth lever for a lot of businesses. So that was my big takeaway. Do you have any, Ethan?
Yeah, two things that just I kept swirling around in my mind. You said, it was just kind of an offhand comment, but you said, don't forget AI is still probabilistic. And I thought, well, that's actually something I really have to think about more, because it does affect how you think about interacting with AI and what you want to get out of it. And I think you really focused on understand the problem you're trying to solve really deeply, and then think about how your strategy for using AI to help you solve that. So so that really stood out for me. And the other thing that I think it's like one of those things that it reminds us that the fundamentals are always, the foundation is always the foundation, and growth is not going to growth will grow with AI, but it's not going to go away because of AI or whatever. Yeah. But the one thing you said is that AI is not the product, the experience. The product is the experience, and I think that's so important as the hype cycle or the AI traps sort of develop around us. As long as you keep those things in focus, then you can still remember what the mission is, what your North Star metric is, and you can focus that way. So kind of long-winded. Sean's not surprised, but yeah, it was a great conversation. I really appreciate it, Marily.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll cut all that out at Ethan when editing. So, Marily, do you have any final thoughts to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, AI is not a magic wand, right? Remember, it's as good as the data you have, as the problem you have, and you got to be very user-centric whenever using it. So just adding AI is not enough. It doesn't guarantee success or anything. So just remember, add strategy in there and be always, truthful about it. It's an exciting time.
Perfect. Well, thank you. This has been an incredible conversation, and so happy that we were able to get you on. And for everyone tuning in, thanks for listening.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Breakout Growth Podcast. Please take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And while you're at it, subscribe so you never miss a show. Until next week.